The hammer fell with a hollow thud, echoing to the small-town auction hall, and Silas Kade felt the faintest thrill of disbelief. $800. $800. That was all it had taken to buy the Crestwood Motel, abandoned for nearly a decade, its name peeling from the cracked sign outside, its windows dark and empty. He glanced down at Rook, his German shepherd, whose ears pricked sharply. The dog's amber eyes followed Silas with an intensity that always unsettled strangers, and occasionally even him. Rook had been with him through worse than this. Sandstorms in the Middle East, nights spent crawling through mud with nothing but the moon to guide them. But even Rook seemed to hesitate now, as if the air around the motel carried a warning he could smell. Silas shook off the unease. A dilapidated building couldn't hurt him. Not really. The auctioneer's voice rattled on in the background, fading into the hum of Silas' own thoughts. He imagined the motel differently now, a place with potential, somewhere he could pour his restless energy, a sanctuary that might help him shake the weight of the war from his shoulders. He'd fought for years for people he barely knew, but he had returned home to an emptiness no metal could fill. Maybe fixing this motel, breathing life into its dusty corridors, could be the project that finally anchored him. By the time he parked outside the property, the sky was bruised purple and gray, the sun a fading ember behind distant hills. The Crestwood Motel stretched before him like a slumbering giant, the gravel crunching under his boots. Weeds pushed through cracks in the asphalt, and a faded vacancy sign swung in the wind, creaking like a slow scream. Rook circled the lot, low growls rumbling in his chest, sniffing the air, tail stiff. "Easy, boy," Silas murmured, but even as he said it, his pulse quickened. There was something about this place, something alive in the silence. He stepped up to the main office door and tried the handle. Locked. Naturally. A thin layer of dust coated the windows inside, and the air smelled of damp wood, mildew, and something else he couldn't name, something faintly metallic. A shiver ran down his spine, and Rook barked sharply, ears flattening. I know, Silas whispered, leaning close to the glass. "It's creepy." But his voice felt small, swallowed by the emptiness around them. The motel had 32 rooms in total, but one door in particular caught Rook's attention immediately. Room 7. Every time Silas glanced that way, Rook's hackles rose. The dog padded to the hallway leading to it, sniffing at the base of the door, scratching lightly, growling softly. Silas followed, hesitant. He had a gut feeling, like a low, persistent drumbeat in the center of his chest, that something wasn't right. He crouched beside Rook, placing a hand on the dog's head. "Don't worry, it's just an old door." He tried to laugh, but it sounded brittle, empty. The lock was rusted and old. He tried pushing it, jiggling it, but it didn't budge. Rook whined, pawing at the wood, nose pressed to the crack at the bottom of the door. Yeah, Silas said. He glanced back at the office, thinking maybe he could find a crowbar or some tools in the abandoned filing cabinets, but the room was stripped bare, save for a rotting desk and a single chair. A half-empty ashtray sat on the corner, yellowed with time. Whoever had been here last had left in a hurry, or never came back. Silas straightened and took a deep breath. The motel had been silent for years, but the silence was heavy, pressing against his eardrums. It made him feel exposed, vulnerable, the same feeling that had crawled over him in combat zones, when the world seemed quiet for the wrong reasons. Rook's growl intensified, the dog's gaze fixed on room 7, as if he were seeing something through the door, something only he could sense. Silas swallowed hard, shivering despite the mild evening air. "You see it too, huh?" he muttered. He didn't expect an answer, of course. Just a dog. But Rook barked, short and sharp, as if insisting that Silas pay attention. Silas ran his hand through his hair, cursing softly under his breath. He had wanted a project, a distraction, a way to reclaim some control in his life. He hadn't expected whatever this was. The motel felt alive, watching him, waiting. A sudden clang echoed from deep within the building, like metal striking metal. Rook jumped, hackles high, and barked again, louder this time. Silas' heart thumped violently in his chest. He wasn't afraid of ghosts. Not exactly. But the sensation of being watched, of stepping into something that had been abandoned yet still carried energy, was foreign and unsettling. Silas crouched, pulling Rook close. The dog pressed his head to Silas' shoulder, growling low. It wasn't fear, at least not entirely. Rook sensed something. Something hidden. Something in room 7. Silas took another deep breath and whispered to himself, almost as if testing his courage. Tomorrow, first thing in the morning. He knew he wouldn't sleep that night. The motel had claimed his attention, and he had a feeling. Rook had a feeling that room 7 was the reason. As the last sliver of sunlight vanished behind the hills, the motel seemed to exhale. A faint draft rattled the office windows. Somewhere down the hallway, room 7 remained stubbornly shut, silent, holding whatever secrets had been left behind. Silas Kade wasn't a superstitious man. Not really. He had faced worse. But as he sat on the cracked floor of the office with Rook at his side, staring at the locked door, he couldn't shake the sense that they had stepped into something that had been waiting a long time, and now it was awake. And that night, the wind whispered through the broken windows, carrying with it the faintest sound of movement. The night settled over the Crestwood Motel like a heavy shroud. Silas Kade had dragged a thin mattress in the storage room into the office, the worn fabric rough against his back as he lay down. Rook curled at his feet, ears twitching, eyes scanning the darkness outside the cracked windows. Even in sleep, the dog seemed alert, a living sensor attuned to things Silas could neither see nor name. The wind whispered through broken panes, rattling the faded sign outside, and every groan of the building echoed like a muted warning. Silas pulled his jacket tighter around himself, listening. At first, it was only the wind, or so he told himself, but soon the sound seemed different. A slow creak from the hallway, a faint scratching at the walls. Room 7. He didn't need to see the door to know it was the source. Rook rose, low growl rumbling in his chest, and padded to the hallway. Silas followed, flashlight in hand, its beam slicing through the shadows. The door of room 7 remained closed, as silent and impenetrable as before, yet something about the air around it made Silas' chest tighten. He knelt beside the door, running his fingers over the warped wood. It's just old, Rook. Nothing more. But Rook's reaction told him otherwise. The dog sniffed at the base of the door, pawed at it, and backed away slightly, hackles raised. That low, insistent growl vibrated in the room, unsettling in its intensity. Silas sighed, leaning against the wall. I should have expected this, he muttered. Nights had always been the hardest. Not in combat, but after it. After the war followed him home in whispers and shadows. Every creak reminded him of gunmetal and sand. Every shadow of corners where he couldn't see an enemy or an ally. He remembered the first night he'd held Rook as a puppy, the dog shivering under the weight of an unfamiliar world. He'd promised him safety then. That promise now felt tenuous, fragile, as if the motel itself were testing them both. A sudden thump made Silas flinch. He spun the flashlight toward the hallway. Nothing. The beam landed on room 7 again, dark and still, and yet something moved just beyond the edges of perception. A flicker of shadow, a shift in the air. Rook barked sharply, a sound that startled Silas more than it startled him. He crouched beside the dog, heart hammering. All right, I hear you. We'll deal with it tomorrow. But even as he said it, he knew it wouldn't wait. The motel had been empty for years, yet it felt alive tonight, breathing around them, watching. Silas' mind wandered unwillingly to war. Memories he had buried deep, the quiet before an ambush, the whistle of rounds past his ears, the sudden rush of panic, of loss, of helplessness. The motel silence seemed to echo those memories. Each creak of floorboard, each whisper of wind through broken glass, mirrored the sounds that had once meant danger, meant death. He rubbed his face, trying to push the memories down. He wasn't in a combat zone. He was in a place he had bought, a project he could control. But the shadows, the unknown, the dog's restless insistence, they all reminded him that control was an illusion. Hours passed in tense stillness. Every minor sound became a threat. Rook never left his side, ears swiveling toward every corridor. Silas had never felt more aware of his own heartbeat, the rhythm of his breathing, the weight of fear pressing down on him. At some point, sleep took him in fragments, dreams weaving the motel into his past. He saw comrades trapped in rooms, shadows whispering their names, and always, room 7 at the center. In the dream, Rook ran ahead, barking, pawing at the door, trying to warn him, trying to tell him something he couldn't yet understand. When he woke, the room was bathed in the gray light of pre-dawn. The motel was still silent, the shadows retreating with the first sun rays. But room 7 remained, closed, dark, waiting. Silas swung his legs over the edge of the mattress, running a hand down Rook's head. "You were right," he said softly. "There's something here." Rook leaned into him, silent now but no less alert. Silas felt a strange mixture of relief and apprehension. The night had passed, but the tension had not. Whatever was behind that door, he knew, would not stay hidden forever, and he had a dog who would not let him ignore it. For the first time since returning home, Silas Kade felt the weight of purpose, not from fixing a building, but from uncovering the truth the motel seemed to be guarding. And room 7, with its locked door and silent secrets, had claimed his attention entirely. He made a silent promise, speaking only to Rook. "Tomorrow, we find out what you've been trying to tell me." The dog nudged his hand, steady and reassuring, as if answering, "We're ready." And somewhere deep in the walls of the Crestwood Motel, the first shadows of a long-held secret shifted, waiting for the day it would finally be revealed. The morning sun filtered through the cracked blinds, casting thin beams of light across the dusty floor of the Crestwood Motel. Silas Kade pushed himself upright, muscles stiff from a night of half-sleep and tension, and stretched. Rook sat alert beside him, ears perked, eyes fixed on the hallway leading to room 7. The dog's gaze was unwavering, as if it could see something hidden behind the warped wooden door. Silas rubbed his jaw and muttered, "All right, buddy, let's see what we're dealing with." He grabbed his flashlight and began his inspection of the motel. The building was a skeleton of its former life. Faded wallpaper curling the edges, furniture rotting in place, and personal belongings left behind in haste, gathering dust and decay. Each room he entered told a story, fragments of lives that had passed through and vanished. In room 3, Silas found a torn diary wedged between floorboards. He flipped through its brittle pages, reading fragments, a woman who had stayed for a week in the summer of 2007, notes about strange noises at night, a man knocking at the door when she least expected it. Her words trembled with fear, the kind of fear Silas knew all too well, the constant undercurrent that something was watching, something unseen. Rook tugged at his leash, whining softly, nudging Silas toward the next hallway. The dog's insistence was growing stronger, pulling him closer to the forbidden door. Room 7. Every instinct in Rook's body screamed urgency. Silas hesitated, letting the dog guide him. He ran a hand along the chipped banister, heart thudding. The closer they got, the heavier the air seemed, thick with an unspoken weight. He tried the door again. Still locked. Rust gnawed at the hinges, and the wood had swollen with age, but it wouldn't budge. Rook pawed at it insistently, growling low, his body rigid with tension. Silas knelt beside him, voice calm but firm. "It's locked, Rook, but I promise we'll get it open. Soon." There was a lingering unease that pressed against him. The motel wasn't just abandoned. It felt deliberate, purposeful, as though someone or something wanted the secrets of room 7 to remain untouched. Silas decided he needed information, and there was only one person who might know something. Abel Thorne, the elderly man who had once been caretaker of the motel. He found Abel living a few miles down the old county road, in a small house cluttered with newspapers, tools, and faded photographs. The man's eyes were sharp, though clouded by age, and when Silas mentioned the motel, his expression darkened. "Room 7, Abel said, almost in a whisper. "Some doors shouldn't be opened. Some memories best left alone." Silas frowned. "You can't just say that. What's behind it?" Abel shook his head slowly. "I don't rightly know. I never went in there. Never wanted to. But things, strange things, happened in that room. People came and went. Some didn't come back. It's not something you want to face alone." Silas noticed a tremor in the man's hands, the way his gaze darted toward the window as if the shadows outside were listening. "I'm not alone," Silas said, patting Rook's head. "I have him, and I'll handle whatever's in there." Abel stared at him, and after a long silence, he muttered, "Just be careful and trust the dog." The words hung in Silas' mind as he drove back to the motel, Rook sitting rigid in the passenger seat, nose pressed to the window. He spent the afternoon moving through the room systematically, cataloging what remained. Photographs of families who had stayed for a night or two, letters left behind on countertops, the occasional personal trinket. Each discovery added to the sense of a hidden history, a layer of life that had abruptly stopped. Rook, however, never wavered from his fixation. Every time Silas tried to examine other rooms, the dog would bolt back to the hallway near room 7, growling softly, tail stiff, ears pricked. It was as if Rook understood the importance of that door in a way Silas could not. By evening, Silas had assembled a small collection of items from various rooms. A stack of letters tied with ribbon, faded photographs of smiling strangers, and a few journals. He spread them across the office desk, hoping the fragments would tell him something. The pieces didn't fit together yet, but he felt the presence of a story waiting, one that room 7 had swallowed and held close for years. And still, the locked door called him. Its silence was heavier now, laden with expectation. Each creak in the floorboards, each gust of wind through broken windows, seemed to whisper, urging him closer. He could feel the tension building, a knot of anticipation that settled low in his stomach. Silas ran a hand through his hair, sitting back in his chair. He knew that tomorrow he would confront the door, that he would uncover what had been hidden so long. He glanced at Rook, whose gaze was unwavering, steady, and unflinching, as if silently promising protection. "Yes," Silas whispered to the dog. "Tomorrow we face it." Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the motel's old sign. Somewhere in the shadows, room 7 waited. And this time, Silas Kade was ready to listen. The night had settled over the Crestwood Motel with a quiet that felt almost unnatural. Silas Kade stood in the dim hallway, flashlight in hand, Rook pacing beside him. The dog's growl had started low and insistent hours ago, but now it had grown sharper, more urgent. His ears pressed forward, paws scratching at the worn floor, tail stiff. Something was happening, or about to happen, behind the door of room 7. Silas took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing heart. The letters, the diaries, the warnings from Abel Thorne, they all pointed to this moment. He had pieced together fragments of stories left behind. Fearful guests, vanished people, secrets that had been hidden for years. But the full truth remained out of reach, locked behind that warped wooden door. Rook let out a sharp bark, then another, pacing in front of room 7. He pawed at the door, growling, his entire body vibrating with intensity. Silas crouched beside him, hand resting on the dog's head. "You've been trying to tell me something, haven't you?" Silas muttered, voice low, almost reverent. "All right, let's see what's going on in there." He grabbed the crowbar he had scavenged earlier and pressed it against the edge of the door. The metal scraped against rusted hinges, sending a hollow echo through the hall. Rook barked again, anxious but insistent, nudging Silas forward. After several tense moments, the door creaked, shifted, and then gave way with a groan that sounded almost like a sigh of relief, or perhaps protest. Dust billowed out, and the faint metallic tang in the air thickened. Silas swallowed hard, heart hammering, flashlight shaking slightly in his grip. The room inside was small, claustrophobic, and filled with an unexpected chaos. Boxes and piles of papers covered the floor, each one yellow with age. Letters were stacked in haphazard towers, bound with fraying ribbon or loose rubber bands. Photographs, faded and curling, littered the shelves, depicting faces frozen in mid-smile, eyes wide with joy or apprehension. But it wasn't just hoarded possessions. Something darker lingered in the corners of the room. Silas stepped carefully, scanning the room, heart tightening with each detail. There were signs of habitation, but not recent. Clothing hung in corners as if someone had left in a hurry. The air smelled of old paper and mildew, but underneath that, something sharper, something metallic, remained, tangling his stomach. He lifted a photograph from a pile. It showed a young girl with bright eyes and a faint, nervous smile. His chest clenched. There was a look in her eyes that reminded him painfully of the helplessness he had seen in war. Innocence caught in a world that demanded more than it should. His hands trembled. Rook nudged at a stack of letters, whining softly. Silas realized the dog had led him here for a reason. It wasn't just curiosity. Rook had sensed the significance, the weight of what had been hidden. Every instinct the dog had ever shown on the battlefield, every alert to unseen danger or unseen life, now felt calibrated to this room. Silas began to sort through the piles. Letters spilled out onto the floor, revealing fragments of lives. People trapped in fear, someone documenting injustices, pleas for help never answered. He realized that Room 7 had been a prison of memories, a shelter for truths too dangerous or too painful for the outside world. A chill ran down his spine. As he read, the stories resonated with him in ways he hadn't expected. The fear, the isolation, the desperate need to be seen. They mirrored his own trauma, his own nights of restlessness and quiet battles with shadows. In a strange, unsettling way, the motel, Room 7, and the people who had left these traces were reflections of him, fragments of struggles he had buried deep within. Rook barked again, more urgently this time, pawing at the far corner of the room. Silas turned and saw a small trapdoor, partially concealed beneath a pile of letters. His stomach clenched. He had the sense that this was the core of the secret, the heart of what Room 7 had been protecting for decades. He knelt beside it, flashlight illuminating the edge of the wooden panel. Rook's growl deepened, warning him, yet urging him forward. Silas ran a hand over the worn wood, feeling the rough grain under his fingers. The trapdoor was locked with a simple padlock, rusted and old. He shook it gently, testing its strength. "You've waited a long time, haven't you?" Silas whispered, glancing down at Rook. The dog's gaze was steady, unwavering, full of faith and insistence. Silas understood. Whatever lay beneath, it had been waiting for someone willing to face it, willing to listen, willing to care. He stood, letting the weight of the moment settle. The room was a repository of pain, fear, and hidden truths. The discovery had shaken him in ways he hadn't anticipated. The motel wasn't just a project to occupy his hands. It was a responsibility, a mission, and he would not ignore it. Silas closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. He had faced chaos and war, death in the sands of foreign lands, and yet this quiet accumulation of hidden human stories was a battlefield of a different sort. His hands had the power to right what had been left wrong, to uncover the stories, to restore what had been silenced. Rook nudged him again, firm and insistent, reminding him that they were a team. Silas patted his head, resolve hardening. Tomorrow, he would confront the trapdoor fully, unlock whatever had been hidden for decades, and face the truth. He would give voice to forgotten, and in doing so, perhaps find a measure of healing for himself. The wind rattled the broken windows once more, carrying with it the echoes of lives long past. Silas stepped back, looking at the room and the small, rusted trapdoor, and felt a mix of fear and determination settle over him. Room 7 had revealed a glimpse, a doorway into a hidden world, and he would not turn away. He whispered to Rook, This is our mission. We see it through." The dog leaned into him, calm now, as if acknowledging the gravity of the moment. Together, they would uncover the truth, and whatever it was, they would face it. Silas Kade's hands trembled slightly as he knelt before the small, rusted trapdoor in Room 7. Rook sat alert at his side, ears pricked and eyes fixed, his whole body taut with anticipation. The letters, photographs, and personal belongings scattered across the room had been unsettling enough, but this was the core, the secret the motel had held for decades. He took a deep breath, steeling himself. He slipped a crowbar into the latch, wiggling it carefully. The padlock groaned and yielded, falling away with a hollow clang that echoed to the silent motel. Rook barked once sharply, then sat tail stiff, as if saying, "Now it's time." Silas lifted the trapdoor. The stairs beneath led down into a narrow, musty basement. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing a small space crammed with boxes, more letters, and a cot covered in old blankets. But what drew his attention most was a single figure curled in the corner. A man, or rather, someone who had been trapped for years, huddled in fear, barely moving. "Hey," Silas whispered, kneeling carefully. "It's okay. You're safe now." The figure stirred, weak and hesitant, eyes wide with disbelief. Rook moved forward, sniffing gently, sensing the fragile humanity of the person before them. Slowly, the man began to speak, fragments of his story spilling out. He had been hidden away, forgotten by the world, a victim of circumstance and neglect. Room 7 had been a prison, a shelter, and a secret, all at once. Silas listened, letting the words wash over him, connecting with the isolation and fear he had carried since returning home. The man's story mirrored his own struggles, the quiet battles, the unseen scars, the sense of helplessness. Yet in this moment, he also felt hope. He had the chance to make a difference, to restore a life that had been lost to the shadows. Carefully, Silas helped the man to his feet. Rook nudged him forward, guiding them gently toward the stairwell. For the first time since entering the motel, the air felt lighter, the oppressive weight of silence lifting slightly. The secret of Room 7 had been revealed, and with it, the first breath of justice, acknowledgement, and compassion. Days passed in a flurry of activity. Silas worked tirelessly, cleaning the motel, repairing walls, replacing broken windows. Each task became a step in his own healing, a tangible action that connected him to life outside the battlefield and the haunted corridors of his past. Room 7, now cleared of clutter and darkness, had been transformed. The basement space was safe, welcoming, a small sanctuary for anyone in need. Letters that had once been hidden were carefully cataloged, shared with authorities where necessary, or returned to families who had once lost hope. The motel became more than a project. It became a mission of redemption, both for Silas and for the people whose lives had been touched by the secrets it had held. Through it all, Rook remained at Silas' side, an unwavering companion, alert to every sound, every shadow. The bond between man and dog deepened, unspoken but unbreakable. Silas often paused, looking down at the dog, remembering all the nights they had survived together, the war, the quiet battles at home, the sleepless vigil outside Room 7. He realized that the dog's loyalty had not only guided him to the truth, but had also been a lifeline through the darkest moments of his life. One evening, Silas stood at the top of the hallway, looking at Room 7 now bright, empty and inviting. It was no longer a room of secrets, fear, and hidden pain. It had become a symbol of renewal, a place where stories could be told, where healing could happen, where the weight of the past could finally be set down. He reached down, scratching Rook behind the ears. "We did it, buddy. We really did it." The dog leaned into him, calm and content, as if sharing the quiet triumph of the moment. Silas breathed deeply, letting the stillness of the motel settle over him. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't known was possible. Room 7 had been revealed, lives had been acknowledged, and he had been part of bringing closure to a story that had waited decades to be told. The wind rattled the windows gently, but it no longer carried menace, only the soft promise of calm. Silas looked around the restored motel and smiled faintly, knowing that the journey of discovery, healing, and connection had reached its end. The past was no longer a shadow over him. It was a guidepost of the person he could become. Rook nudged his hand once more, reminding him that some bonds were eternal. Silas knelt, resting his forehead against the dog's head, and allowed himself to feel the quiet triumph, the deep relief, and the simple joy of having faced the unknown, and come through intact. The motel had been more than a building, more than a secret. It had been a mirror of life itself, painful, mysterious, frightening, and ultimately redeeming. And for Silas Kade, that was enough. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more thrilling veteran dog tales. Join our community and never miss a story that touches the heart and sparks the imagination.